Teachers everywhere. It is summer of 2024, episode 2.
Ooh. What are we going to do on the Teacher Squad podcast, Jane? Well, we're going to talk about the rich and the rest of us. And I think I know which camp I land in.
And I'm going to talk about, well, are punks, or are they just gothic rockers? I mean, sort it out.
Get your details right. We're going to be talking about compassion and kindness, and I'm going to throw in a poem for teachers.
Oh, and I'm asking, can Minecraft save teaching and learning? Well, we're going to unpick and unpack the state we're in, and maybe you can reflect what state you're in. Are you crying in the car park about to enter school? Please don't cry. It's going to be all right.
It's going to be all right. We're here for you. Let's get started.
Brilliant.
So, Jane, summer term seems to be the time for a little bit different episodes. Our second piece of homework for our gorgeous, lovely listeners was to have a watch of Darren McGarvey's episode from a series called The State We're In. And the episode, obviously, that we wanted people to have a little watch of was all about education. How can the attainment gap between the wealthiest and the poorest children be narrowed? Darren McGarvey heads back to the classroom to find out. So he's a hip hop artist and an author. So he's not an educator as such, and he's gone to have a look at different classrooms, 5 different places, and to have a look at how we can narrow that gap. So did you enjoy your watch, Jane?
Yeah, I did. It's actually quite a long watch, isn't it? He went to 5 different places. I thought data like 7% of the pupil community go to fee-paying schools, go to the private sector, and then we've got the other 93% of children in the country. I thought that was just fascinating in itself, because sometimes it's quite hard to get your hand on big picture data, even from the DFE, sometimes overwhelm us with numbers. Actually, when you want some more nitty gritty information, like I've always wanted to spit out spelling and grammar results before they get aggravated as spag results. And sometimes certain data is hard to get hold of. So I thought that was just interesting in itself to give us a kind of a picture of the haves and have nots around the country.
Yeah, I like that. I wrote down that the haves and the have-nots, the private and the publics, the rich and the rest of us. Yeah. I know which camp I firmly land in. But we talk about that, and I thought that number 7%, did it surprise you? Because I thought it was a bit higher than that. I kind of had in my mind that a lot of those people are in the top jobs.
Yeah.
And you know, their pathway and their track is set from the moment that they step into their schools. But I thought there were more, but I think it can be a bit skewed depending on where you are, because there are pockets of private schools, aren't there? And
that's right.
You know, and areas where there's just none.
North. Yeah, and also related to that, I think which is not clear is homeschooling, and we know that homeschooling is on the rise, and attendance has been hurt since post-COVID, and lots of school refusing is happening, and we can see that in data across all schools. And I think as part of that homeschooling, I think there is another strand of private payment that is going to tutors, where you know there might be certain things that parents can do or feel they can cover, but in things like getting ready for GCSEs and whatnot, there is a massive increase in tutors either bolstering what's kind of provision over and above what's happening at school, but also people who are opting out, who then want kind of your specialist chemistry tutor. or whatever. And I know that tutoring is an exploding area of education.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to the private school, Jane.
Yeah,
I mean, as a kid, like I'm from Anfield,
yeah,
a real poor working class area,
yeah,
and I don't think I would have known what a private school was when when I was younger. So even as an adult, I've only been into some private schools fairly recently, uh, linked with Reading Rock's work. And I
yeah,
have to admit that the first one I went to, I was nervous. I felt out of my depth and inadequate, even though I'd been called in as an expert to help. I think and then as you drive up the grounds are always beautiful.
yeah,
They kind of go into the grounds are absolutely gorgeous. But then once you go into the setting, it's just a school and it feels very familiar, and it's not necessarily like this amazingly high-tech, fancy, awesome setting. For me, the differences are the class numbers
yeah, absolutely.
and the I think let me see if I've written it down. And something that Darren said when he visited Gordonstone, the private fee-paying school that King Charles did actually attend. He said something about those. It's the connections that a place like that has, that pupils can get on this direct line onto the pathway, that the career that they are looking for. Um, but yeah, I
I
have.
don't. I mean, I don't know how. Like in a sense, he did talk a lot about these children having a priority pass, and they were able to
Mm,
queue skip, I should say. I nearly skewed Miss Kit's kit there myself. But like there's this talent, once they reveal a talent or aptitude for something, that they are enabled to get there. And I don't know if I felt that as much from watching it. I just felt more that the breadth of the curriculum provision, uh, almost as well the fact that they were boarding meant there was a level of provision, like voluntary runs in the morning at 7:45. You're going to
quarter to
do
6.
6:45, was it? Oh,
Oh
good job.
yeah, it was early, early.
Was it
Woo!
6:45?
Yeah.
If I'm going to sod up numbers, that'll be me. But like all the
Sorry,
outdoor,
guys, 2 hours late for the run.
I was there and my kit on. What?
Good
Uh,
excuse.
all the outdoor experiences, the drama. The breadth. You can hit
Mm.
the climbing wall at 8:30 at night. I've probably got that time wrong as well. Anyway,
9 o'clock, that one.
thanks. All right, shut up.
It's
uh,
going to be fun, this episode.
so all in all, it was just the the breadth of provision, and I think where any school that moves in a mode of we want to know you, we want to know you, we want to know about you. We've got this smorgasbord of provision. What is the thing that's kind of switching you on? I think, and we know that as well, that narrowing a curriculum doesn't necessarily improve the standards. Children
Mm.
do need to be engaged in the arts and sports and music, in the getting to know themselves. Uh, and
Yeah, it was very much about the individual, wasn't it? I think
yes,
we've got in state that kind of keep the pack together, and yeah, a bit like
yeah,
the data, and kind of individuals get lost in the mass of such a percent has reached the standard, and we're so focused on
Yeah.
reaching the standard. And when we touched on it in the last episode about that over reliance on the test and the assessment and teaching towards that,
Yeah.
and actually maybe it's about the compass and the navigation of a school like that. It's about the target is the success of each child, and that looking different for each one. What something that I wrote down from his time at Gordonstone was, he says they've got all the ingredients that culminate in that success outcome, and it's not one thing, is it? And the series was looking about how we can level the playing field, and it isn't one thing. It isn't making sure that they can all write at that level. It isn't making sure that they can all do maths at that level. Actually, it's a more rounded approach, and yeah, it's having those ingredients. And you talked about tuition, but they had that at Gordonstone, didn't they, as well? It's kind of like they've all got the basis, the foundation of the curriculum. Everybody's got that equity and that access to it. But then those that need a little bit of extra on this get it. Those that are sparked on that get that extra stretch. It was, yeah, a rounded
And on top of
approach.
the charts, we know that one-to-one tuition is the game-changing difference. You know, if we can actually drill it down to that, what do you personally need next? Just you, where are you at? We know that takes it time and time again. And of course, if you're thinking, you know, you've got 12 in the class, you can uh, see more closely the
Absolutely.
needs next. What do you need next to get there? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I think what also came through was, and I think it came through, I suppose, across all of the. I know we've not talked about all of the settings yet, and there was 5 different places he went to, but that, I mean, I'm probably going to call it motivation, but uh, under that banner of motivation, uh, pupils were motivated and successful because they believed that they belonged there, and they felt accepted in the environment. You know, there was a real sense of belonging. I mean, you're not going to get up at R5, are you, and put your kit on and start running around the grounds unless you are motivated and feel like you belong, and someone's going to notice that you're doing that. You've got a team to run with, and
Yeah.
yeah, that
I think
sense of belonging really came through for me.
belonging and the mindset. There's a kind of legacy in a school like that of people who before you have done well, and there are people to rise up and aspire to it, keeping the heart of the individual, but there's a sense of expectation, but in a good way. I
Yeah,
mean, just from what we've seen, I've not, I haven't attended a
yeah,
private school. I haven't taught in a private school. I'm sure that, for balance, there's probably some sense of expectation that can tip over and isn't great. But when you look at it from the outside, broadly, having that sense of expectation that we can all achieve just makes you hold yourself in a different way. We're part of something where people do well, and it becomes almost that self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it?
yeah. And I think I actually, what I liked about the private school was how rubbish the boarding house was. Do you know what I
I
mean? It was like their rooms, they were naff, weren't they? And there's something about that. It's just like your sense of belonging and motivation comes from then the people and your school day and what you make of it. Because it certainly wasn't flash, was it? The bedrooms.
Absolutely, and I think that my experience of going to private schools, yeah, the grounds are always beautifully kept, but actually in there it isn't all the flash that you expect. So when you're looking about in state, what can we take from that and bring to it about leveling up? It isn't necessarily about having the most amazing brand spanking new building that, you know, has lights that come on as you step into the, I don't know, you know, it
Yeah,
isn't
yeah, yeah.
about all of that.
No.
It's important to look at, it's about values and ethos, really. Yeah.
And how the and pupils deeply understanding, because of how we're running the school, that intelligence is malleable, you know,
Mm.
have the ability to do whatever you want through hard work. Pupils have got to deeply understand that, you know. um
Yeah, and that comes to the motivation then, doesn't it?
yeah,
I'm willing to work hard
yeah,
because I
yeah,
can see
yeah.
what the fruit is, and I
But
know that I've been led to believe that I'm capable of that fruit. I can
yeah,
see how valuable it is.
yeah.
It's a whole picture.
I mean, but we mustn't forget, you know, the backdrop of private schools. Remember, a lot of the reasons why they do well, it's like your social mobility agenda, you know, because of parental backing. Maybe you could say because of the force of the wallet that sort of gets them there. You know, there is this sense of, right, kid, you're going to do well. We're paying for this, you know. Um,
Mm.
it's maybe, you know, that brings another dimension as well.
Yeah, and you
I mean, that
needed
wasn't part of the
a lot.
program, was it? Okay, so where else did we go to after the
Then the
private school?
opposite, total opposite
Yeah,
end of the spectrum. So from Gordonston, where it's like 45 grand for a year. I mean,
yeah,
whoa.
yeah.
Um, over to Wales, Ysgol
Yes,
Nantgwyn, um,
in the Rhondda
high
Valley.
levels
Yeah,
of deprivation, and we saw this school's community pantry. Now, I have to say, Jane, the young lad who was showing Darren the community pantry, what a kid!
adorable,
So
adorable. Yeah,
kind, compassionate, articulate,
yeah.
um, brilliant.
And not only did he talk about the food poverty support for that school and how he was managing the pantry, he also talks about the pre-loved uniform shop
Mm,
and actually all the things the school was doing to support children in getting ready for learning. You know, how that school helped them with mental health, emotionally and psychologically, and all manner of things. But I also love the line from Ryan Evans, the deputy head there, who said, you know, we've got to be a shining light. And actually, I thought Ryan was so inspirational. I went to look at their website, and there's a quote on there under their mental health support page from direct from him that says, "You are never alone. We are here to help and support you." And sort of taking that position rather than, "Oh my God, our jobs are getting more like social services." It's like, you know, no, we are upstanding members of the community. This is an integral part of how we're going to help you, you know. And you know, uh it seemed to me that uh uh, that families were really thought about, and the open doorness of that school was absolutely palpable, wasn't
absolutely, it was incredible, and the difference that they were making. And for me, I find it incredibly frustrating because the huge gap that they are filling before we've even started thinking
teaching and
about
learning?
curriculum and
Yeah,
extracurriculum, finding what makes each child tick, you know, clothing them, feeding them, looking about their mental health. And massive applause to many, 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 many educators out there who are doing that because of that dire need.
yeah.
But I feel torn about that because
Angry, I'd say.
and
I feel.
like, yes, they, in the world that we're in, they should be doing that, but actually they shouldn't be doing that. There's a
Yeah,
sense of teachers should be experts in teaching,
yes,
and we should have, and I believe that they should be in the school, in the hub, but experts on mental health, and social care, social support
Yeah.
should be provided for by the government,
Yeah.
and teachers are being pulled, state
Yeah.
school teachers,
Yeah.
particularly state school teachers in
Yes.
areas of higher deprivation.
Yeah.
Their
Because they can't.
job
Because they
has
can't.
more
Yeah.
to it. It
Yeah.
does have more to it. And
Yeah.
then when we start inspecting schools against the same frameworks, when they're not in the same situations,
Yeah.
it's difficult. You've got children arriving who are inadequately clothed, they're not clean,
Hungry.
they've not been fed. You've got a big task on your hands just to make sure they're okay as a human being
Yeah.
before we've even talked about them having some sense of success in their life, and then that kind of aspiration and thought process beyond that. So that for me is where the massive gap. We can talk and wax lyrical about the actual teaching and the curriculum and how that's approached, but really it's all about that foundation, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is the problem, isn't it? Schools are working, no school is the same, and so many schools are different, and they're not comparable with some of the issues that they're dealing with. Absolutely not. Some of the direct things that they're dealing with. Um, and there's but without children being emotionally secure, then we can't get to teaching and learning. And we know, don't we, the TS report has said that issues around behaviour and mental health are now the biggest struggles that teachers are facing on a daily basis. um,
Mm,
and we also know that thousands of teachers are leaving the profession and citing stress, anxiety, and depression because there's so much to consider in our jobs. And as you say, we're on the sort of the grey area, on the edges of our jobs. What's in our remit. Um, but yeah, there's a lot to contend with. But I think that school what I loved about that school, and you've already mentioned the lad running the pantry, but there was this sort of engagement of the pupils to work with families. It's actually
mm.
that was the way they shared the load. They had upper key stage 2 children sort of coordinating these sort of support networks for families. So yeah,
Yeah,
really important.
really inspiring
Yeah.
school. And I think the next place that Darren went to was Finland, but I think
Don't talk for a minute.
we often are looking externally to like Finland, etc. But we've got amazing practice in our own schools across the country, that are doing great jobs that we can look at. Should we go to Finland? What did you think of Finland's section?
Oh, do you know what? I just felt there's something about it made me feel a little bit depressed in the sense that the zoom in of the teaching and learning was kids in a community ICT sort of uh, technological space playing Minecraft. And I'm like, I'm not having this. I'm not having this. I can't feel that this is a virtuous thing to do. I didn't really get a sense of the learning objective, and it was just me really fed up as I watched it. That the Minecraftness of it, um, just I couldn't uh, relate to it in any way that this could be meaningful or powerful or improving our thinking or improving our intelligence in any way. I was just a bit fed up, and it's just like, yeah, all the kids love you, mate, but like for what reason? Because they let you know how to doss around on Minecraft. I don't know. It was,
Well, do you not think that they're making a TV program? Let's face it, it's a TV program. It's got to be interesting,
yeah,
and it's got to spark kind of response. And
yes,
actually, I'm sure they do that Minecraft and there's learning, and I bet you there's plenty of teachers in this country who use Minecraft for learning as well. It
Yes,
isn't,
yeah,
it's not, it's innovative, but not that innovative, let's face it.
no,
And it's it for us looking at it as educators, we probably wanted a bit more of the real and the raw, and what does it look like on an everyday, like if we went to visit
yes,
ourselves,
yeah,
we want to see how are you actually teaching these kids language,
yeah,
how are you teaching these kids number.
that's right.
um so you kind of have to, not let yourself get swayed by that.
And
I
I
like the
also,
fact that they
yeah,
took their shoes off and they were nice and comfy. I feel like when I'm having a bad day, I take my shoes off and feel a bit more grounded. It
yeah,
helps, and we should try that. Can we have some
yeah. I, th-
research on
I think there has been some
learning with no
research
shoes
about
on?
kind of slipper learning and shoes off learning. I think there has been that actually does create a sense of calm. I think the thing is we've got to be dead careful about Finland because it is up there in in the best schools in kind of international PISA ratings. We know they don't start formal school till they're 7, but we also know that the Finnish language has got great orthographic transparency, so sounds and letters have very close one-to-one correspondence. So in terms of kind of learning to read and then on to learning to write, it's really easy to pick up. So we've got to be dead careful. And we also know that Finland have really high quality preschool settings. Um, and we know if we've got high quality preschool settings, provision before school, that on reading assessments, children get 54 more points on average than kids who haven't had preschool sort of early year settings. So we've got to be a bit mindful about sort of, I suppose, oversimplifying it.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but
And
I think
chick
there was something again that I'm going to come back to about that sort of sense of belonging, and
mm,
and you just felt there was deep respect, didn't you? I'm calling you by your first name,
I
teacher,
love that.
but also I'm talking to you with a real level of respect. There was a calmness about it, wasn't there? It felt very, very comfortable,
It
didn't
did,
it?
but I was just going to say, it's almost like a chicken and egg thing
Yeah.
with the whole respect and comfort, and also the type of learning that they were able to do post 7 because of what happens in the highly valued preschool setting.
Yes.
In the Guardian, there's an article recently about Estonian education, and very similarly to Finland, things that stood out from there were free lunches for all.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and the headline says brain breaks and happy teachers.
Yeah.
And it's kind of about respect all round. And that teacher in Finland
Yeah.
felt very safe in their role. That's the sense that I got from him.
Yeah.
And he felt comfortable in making the choices for his pupils and knowing them.
Yeah.
Um, I, I think when we look at other countries and other types of education, we do have to be careful, like you say, to look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
We can't, when we talked about Ofsted and schools being overburdened with incentives, I think historically in this country's education, we've looked for the shiny sticking plaster,
Yeah.
and we're going to take that bit. They don't have uniforms. Let's all not have non-uniform. That'll
Yeah. Yeah.
fix it, and it isn't the case. I
Yeah.
personally think uniforms are outdated and
Yeah.
they should go. But I don't think that's a panacea, is it? It's not something that is going to be fixed. The thing that struck me for Finland, Darren said, equality is a principle rather than a platitude. And I think that sense of everybody working together to make sure that all of these kids had all of the potential opportunity
Yeah.
is is what stood out to me.
But that's happening in Finland on a societal level, that divide
Exactly.
between rich and poor is not there. It's got the smallest amount of gap, because, it's that deep sense of kind of equality. Um, yeah, it's, when you look at and this TV program is not proof, is it? They're just giving us clues about what
Mhm.
might work. But if you look at the kind of the top scoring schools for maths and English, like Japan, Canada, Singapore, Finland, and so on, there are some commonalities that come through, and it 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 seems we have lost our way a little bit because of our heavy test culture, high
Mm.
stakes. That actually the most effective programs, um, curriculums, schooling, as it were, is yes, we want to develop their cognitive skills, whatever subject that is, but of equal balance, the places that do best are also thinking about pupils' characters, you know, a- and their motivation.
Yeah.
And I don't think we give motivation enough of a look in, have children deeply found how what they want to be motivated by, for its own sake. Um, and again, I think that becomes from like, we want to see you, child, individual, find out what you want, what switches you on, what makes you tick. Let's develop that
Mm.
as well as these other things. And because we want you to find out who you are. But while we've still got an Ofsted making snap judgments too quickly in 2 days of one, and a high stakes testing system, and as we said in the last episode, some of the things we're testing are absolutely ridiculous, like grammar out of context, rubbish that needs to go. With all of the, it's like high levels of intense judgment, all of our curriculum gets skew whiffed to this very narrow sense of what the tests are,
Yeah.
and less about who you are as a future citizen for our world,
Absolutely. It's big, deep stuff, isn't it? And
yeah.
I think we're talking about the whole big picture in for education, but actually it's where education fits in at a societal level,
Yeah.
and uh, uh, and who's running the country, and their vision, and maybe there's a fear about letting the little people believe in themselves and something, because that
God,
would be
don't get that.
empowering and
That's really
dangerous.
deep. That's a bit too deep for me, Heather. Just going
Next
quickly
setting
to
Darren visits.
yes, go on.
Pardon?
Go, you go.
He visited one of the family hubs, which is probably a can of worms we shouldn't open. We've talked about the fact before that the Tories got rid of the wonderful Sure Start centres and then are just popping up some family hubs. And, yeah,
But
we
what
need
what
lots of
I loved,
early stuff.
yeah, and that, just a reminder by watching the program that the first 1001 days of life of a baby are so critical. We're not going to get into kind of psychology now, but the importance around attachment and calm and talk, and of course stories. And I'm going to quickly take us on to it got called St. Martin's, the play school, and tell us about that tweet, because you really are up there with your polls and your tweets, miss. Because who have
Oh,
you been
well,
tweeting?
bit of a chance for me. So, Darren McGarvey, who was the host of this documentary, I thought I would chance asking him a question. Um, so I just asked him what his standout moment was from this whole documentary experience. Um, and for him, it was St. Martin's School, seeing the learning through play, and Finland. But it was St. Martin's that he mentioned there up in Glasgow. Again, a school in an incredibly uh, high deprivation area, and a school that had a playful pedagogy. The theory of playful learning was important there. there were things that stood out to me. The examples of play that we actually saw, I didn't feel were massively groundbreaking or innovative. Actually, it was a maths lesson where the pupils were using concrete resources to visually see and understand number 1s to 10.
Yeah.
And I
Really
thought,
fix, etc. Yeah.
loads
Yeah.
loads of schools are using practice like that. I really would have liked to have gone to that school and seen a bit more of what this playful pedagogy looked a little bit further up,
Yeah.
what that looked like in practice. But
Yeah.
actually what stood out for me when he spoke to the head teacher, the head talked about play being a gentle way of dealing with some of the issues, and the school being a compassionate place is what really stood out to me. And Darren said, addressing all the needs of the child is how we can begin to bridge this gap. So it's what we've talked about before, about backfilling all of that with compassion is really what makes the shift and what makes the change.
Yeah. And almost seeing behavioral issues as kind of your response as a teacher is like that compassionate position. Why? What can we do? How can we make it better? Absolutely. I tell you what, the final place he went to, I got a bit confused about this. So it's called XP in Doncaster. It's one of two schools up north that are a part of a small trust. Um, and it's got the name The Punk School. Um, I was a bit like, why? I don't get that bit. Did you get that bit, Heather? I've been a bit stupid, don't I?
I quite like the fact that they pointed out the two co-head teachers. I love them. They're in their jeans and just like a rock band t-shirt and stuff like that. I thought I loved it. I guess that's just their mindset and their approach. And they clarified that they were punks, not hippies. But they again had this very holistic approach. Before we talk about that, Jane, we've
Yeah.
talked about St. Martin's and Ysgol Gwyn, how hard teachers are working
Yeah.
to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
I brought a bit of light relief again. I brought a poem from a poet we know and love, Joshua Siegel, and it's called "Let's Hear It for the Teachers." May I read it to you before we go full
Yes.
plunk?
Great poem. Do it. I love this poem.
Let's hear it for the teachers, a curious crew. There isn't a limit to what they will do. They mark all your work and they do not despair when you still cannot tell between there, and there. They tell you the same thing again and again while you sit staring blankly and chewing your pen. Sometimes their job isn't terribly fun with scary inspectors and scarier mums and screaming young children and meddling MPs, picking holes in their work like a lump of Swiss cheese. But listen to me, for I swear that it's true. The reason they teach is they care about you. The reason they get up at stupid o'clock is to give you the key that will open the lock. They're desperate to help you to be at your best, to be better people, not just pass a test, to do well, to think well, and walk tall with pride. Let's hear it for the teachers, for they're on your side.
Oh, great poem.
It's a great poem, isn't it? I thought it was really, really apt for what we're talking about. The
Yeah. I tell you what, the reason why we get up at
bridging the
stupid
gap.
o'clock is to run around the grounds, in the running club, to look at the beautiful cut hedges. Yeah. Okay.
Back to punk school. I looked
Yeah.
on the website for punk school, and the thing that
Yeah.
stood out straight at the top was, above all, compassion. And
Which links back to your head teacher at St. Martin's, doesn't it? I'm going to talk about you talking about them sitting there in their t-shirts and their Converse, the co-heads, all cash and everything. And I'm thinking, you're wearing a Cure t-shirt, and I'm sorry, they're gothic rock. They're not punk. So what the hell? Like, are you a punk school or a gothic rock school? And the other thing I want to say about punk school, they kept, surely the slogan of punk is like, we don't care, no future. There's other ruder ones by the Sex Pistols, but they kept then saying, we're called the punk school, we're really kind. I'm like, what
Oh,
is this? Are you a punk school or not? I'm saying, I don't even think they're a punk school.
I think you're fixated on the word punk just a little bit too much, Jane. Let's go back to the compassion
Yeah.
and the kindness. And I loved what they said,
Yeah.
that they'd actually done some research on the correlation between how kind kids were and their academic success. And they talked about kindness to themselves,
Yes.
kindness to each other, and
Yes.
kindness to the environment, our world, our society. And I thought, well, if ever there's something to hang your curriculum on, there's that.
And I
So,
think that third aspect of kindness to the environment, that was just, for me, that was taking it that outward level further. I just loved
absolutely,
that.
it worked out with that lovely ripple, didn't it?
Yes.
When I asked Darren McGarvey what his standout, I thought this school is what would have been his standout, because
I
for
know.
me,
Yeah.
the pupils that he spoke to, the articulation,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and he also talked about the parallels with
Yeah.
Gordonston.
Yeah.
Um, I thought that would have been his standout. For me, that's the
It was my
school
favourite. It was my
that
favourite. Yeah.
that's the place that looked like the gap had been bridged
Yeah.
more so
And that's where
than
you'd
anywhere.
want your kids to go to, and that's where you'd love to teach. And what was coming through, I've talked about where belonging is strong and children find internal
Yeah,
motivation. The sense of self in that school was just
absolutely.
palpable. And I love the way the co-heads kept saying, your voice is valid, your voice is
Yes,
valid. And then having, the blokes in the place in tears, crying openly. We were just kicking toxic manhood to the corner. And then I was like, I don't trust this. Is it just looking good on camera? Not that this is the only judgment, but went and downloaded their Ofsted report. And their Ofsted report said behaviour is impeccable, but the academic progress the children make at this school is outstanding. You know,
it's
it's
like that triple threat, though, in the sense of they've got
yeah,
the academic
yeah,
success,
yeah,
they've got the self-control and the behavior, but then they've got the belief and the heart about something. It's
yes,
actually that whole roundedness. To
yeah,
me, this if you're gonna go, if you haven't watched it, just
yes,
go
you
and watch
must.
that last 15-20
Don't
minutes.
watch all of it. I
Yeah,
watch
but
all
if
of
you
it and email us and get a badge. And Jane at the Teacher Squad podcast.com and Heather at the Teacher Squad podcast.com. Yeah, it was wonderful. And how they were able to show that link with kindness and uh,
absolutely.
academic
It,
success.
when they talked about the parallels with Gordonston,
Yeah,
and the two heads weren't surprised, because one of the founders of Gordonston was Kurt Hans,
yeah,
and who'd also been involved with Outward Bound. And
yes,
he shared a quote, and I just thought it was great. So I went to kind of find out a little bit more about that, because it stood
yeah,
out to me.
good.
And the quote from Kurt Hans was, "There is more in us than we know. If we could be made to see it, perhaps for the rest of our lives, we will be unwilling to settle for less." And I just thought that was such a powerful quote. Kurt Hans was born in 1886, died in 1974. But that quote, and then when I looked up about Kurt Hans, and there's these 10 expeditionary learning principles,
Yeah.
which are so interesting, which like his work's based on. Yeah, go and have a look at those if you
Yeah.
haven't. But I think
Put
they
the link in the
hang.
show notes, will you, Heather? Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you saw in that XP school was coming through. Not only are every child's opinion valid and respected, but how they live that kindness through their articulation of their thoughts and ideas. And we saw a
Yeah,
pupil thanking and summarizing, very hard for kids to do, summarizing and thanking adults around them for almost like the gifts that they've bestowed onto them and how they've grown it into something else. And this sense that you could feel from her talk that it's like the think bigness of like the
yes,
possibilities of her future life, and how another female teacher credited her
yeah,
for the woman that she was growing into, and going to go on
beautiful,
and change things in the world. And there was no
absolutely
doubt in that
gorgeous.
child's mind she was absolutely going to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I would like to. So I'd like to chat to those two heads. I think we should try and get in touch and see if
I
they would.
think you'd like to sleep with those two heads. You don't shut up about them.
Here's a number for you, Jane. 3. Um, um, I
Is my
I would
favourite number.
I would imagine number. I'd like to know whether they are considering having primaries within the trust, and what that ethos would look like, that like key stage 2, key stage 1, early years.
Yeah,
Um, because it's interesting, as we're primary educators,
yeah,
that it was the secondary setting that
yes.
that stood
S
out to
Stole
us.
our hearts, didn't it, that one? Absolutely, it really did.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's a visit, Heather. Maybe we should go and visit that school, you and me. We could do the
Yeah.
podcast from the school. Yeah, that'd be good, wouldn't it?
Podcast on tour. Oh, I love that
Yes.
idea,
In
Jane.
fact, if you want your school to host the podcast, we could do a little tour of the podcast. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? That's something to think about. If
There's
that is you,
definitely something to think about, and
yeah.
badges galore then, Jane. They won't be exclusive.
Oh
Oh,
dear. We
yeah,
could go.
definitely. Drop us an email. But
Yeah.
coming back to the focus, Jane, Darren
Yes.
did like a kind of bit of a summarising, as you know,
Yes.
and reflection at the end. Um, and I thought, let me see, I wrote loads down at the summarising point, and I'm trying to find the bit. And this is a bit that stood out to me. If all the best people are in all the top best jobs, why is this country such a bin fire?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of like, we know that all the kids from the 7% are ending
Yeah.
up in those
The
big top
powerful
jobs.
positions. Yeah.
Um, why aren't they affecting the change? Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was an interesting watch, and I don't think Darren himself came out of it with any clear answers about how we effectively bridge that gap. There were glimmers of hope, but as we talked about this, like it's big vision, big society change. But my last notes on it were, what questions should we be asking of education? I think us working with schools, teachers in schools, you know, everybody around education, what we need to be thinking, what are we asking of it, and what are we doing to move it forward? What were
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
concluding thoughts, Jane?
I think as we get, I think it's a bit of a depressing sort of conclusion, but as we, in this era of feeling overloaded, time pressured, bogged down, having to kind of digest another enormous Ofsted report about where our direction in English and so forth, but the whole system sort of loaded with judgment on high stakes testing, I think we are losing sight of helping children in their broadest sense find out who they are
Mm.
and what is motivating them to be future citizens. And I think we need to have this sort of growing sense as time goes by that they also understand that it's multifaceted, and that we know them, but that gets celebrated back into their sort of journey through school, so they
Mm.
leave with a sense of this is who I am. And I think somehow in the mess we've lost that.
Yeah, we need a, a
A refit.
redirection of the ship, don't we? We
Yeah,
need
we
to
do.
be,
We do.
yeah,
But please
and
don't leave
and a pulling
teaching.
together.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
but
don't
stay.
leave teaching. Keep doing the amazing job that you're doing.
Yeah.
Keep bridging the gap for those pupils and
Yeah.
seeing them all as beautiful individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Heather, don't ask me any more big questions. You keep putting me on the spot trying to say, right,
Oh, sorry.
all right, super intelligent thing. I'm going to call a close to this because you're scaring me. Let's call it a day.
a bit of lightness next
Yes.
week.
Yeah.
Back to rubbing books against you, Jane.
Oh, good. Thank goodness for that.
Hey, I just noticed that you were so serious on the last two episodes that you
Yes.
haven't even touched upon the PG list. This is
Oh,
how we make you behave yourself, by
I
giving
know.
you really gritty, serious thinking stuff.
Not one PG word past my lips, and it's going to stay like that until next week. All right,
Oh, and then
Heather,
she's going to explode with them.
well, always a pleasure. I will see you next week, honey bunnies. It is big love
From
from
me,
Heather.
Heather, and Heartbursts from her, Jane. See you, everyone.
Bye.